Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 and AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. We are now, I'm Larry O'Connor, by the way, and joined by Tori Clark, who is sitting in for the vacationing
First
Brian
you forgot who I was, now you're forgetting who you are.
I didn't forget who you were. I was just thinking about KT McFarland before, and then now I just assume everybody knows that you're here, but I have to remind them that the fabulous Tori
and
Clark
not for much longer.
Is sitting in for the vacationing Brian Wilson, and we are now joined by Shannon Bream. She is the Supreme Court reporter for Fox News Channel, and boy, this is like covering the Super Bowl for you, Shannon Bream. You must be having a heck of a week.
I am. It's absolutely just like that. It's funny because it was exactly a year ago that 3 days of cases were argued over the health care law, so this week in March seems to be pretty popular with the justices. Yeah,
exactly. And so, well, let's first recap what happened yesterday, and it was really the Prop 8 argument. First of all, based on your experience, I'm not asking to make a prediction, but what was the direction in terms of what was being discussed from the justices? What were they focusing on?
You know, there seems to be the real possibility that they don't even get to the merits of this case because there are a couple of technical legal issues. One of them is about standing, about whether the proper parties are bringing this case, because once Prop 8 was passed in California, the governor and the attorney general there said, we're not going to defend it in court. So the state doesn't have a director, somebody acting directly on its behalf, but the group of folks who support Prop 8 have taken up the legal defense. So there was a lot of discussion about whether they even have proper standing to bring this case, and several of the justices all across the ideological spectrum seem to suggest that maybe the court should slow down. There were comments not long ago from Justice Ginsburg saying that Roe was decided too quickly, that society's evolving on these things. Justice Alito was one who said yesterday, the concept of us having same-sex marriage here in the U.S. is newer than cell phones and the Internet. And so why not let it play out state by state through the democratic process? So it seemed to be a lot of hesitation that maybe they don't even get to the merits on the case.
So, Shannon, they could just punt, essentially, and say this probably shouldn't be before us now and never mind?
It is entirely possible, yes.
Wow. So that's pretty surprising. What else did anybody come out of what you thought was their lane? Did somebody say something yesterday that really surprised you?
Not so much. I mean, we would expect that, with the split, that we have 4 and 4 that are essentially most of the time pretty reliable in which way that they're going to go, leaning more conservative and leaning more liberal. Now, Justice Sotomayor, of course, one of President Obama's appointees and one of the newest members, considered to lean to the left. But even she asked a question yesterday saying, if we find that marriage is a fundamental right, where can the state ever draw the line? Where does the state have an overriding interest? What about polygamy? What about incest? So even she was asking questions seeming to indicate this is going to be really difficult. Even if we try to give you the result that you want, we're going to have a real struggle with that.
Yeah, and really, honestly, isn't the other big issue that's before the court the fact that this was a statewide proposition? They're overturning the will of the people here versus overturning a legislature or a state house. Does that factor into the argument at all?
Well, it certainly did come up yesterday saying, why not let this democratic process play out? This is what the people of California have decided.
And state after state after state are making these decisions. Like in Maryland, they just decided statewide that, yes, they will affirm same-sex marriage. So why inject the court in the middle of this very hot democratic process?
Well, and opponents of Proposition 8 will say you can't allow people to go to the polls and vote for something that's unconstitutional. If it's discriminating against a particular class, if it plays out in a way that is unconstitutional, it doesn't matter if they voted for it or not. That's their argument.
Did you happen to hear Rob Reiner yesterday?
He was sitting right next to me.
Oh, my gosh. Did you talk to him at all?
I did not. We had no eye contact. But the focus was on the justices.
Well, he was one of the ones that started the foundation when Prop 8 passed.
Yes.
They started the foundation, in his own words, I heard him say in horror that this had happened and that they were going to use legal means to try to overturn it. And I thought it was so ironic that he was saying the will of the people can't stand here. And I'm paraphrasing what he said.
Right.
But that we cannot let people decide these sorts of things. But he made an interesting argument. He said, if it were just what the popular vote was at the time, then maybe blacks couldn't vote, maybe women couldn't vote. I thought it was an interesting approach, but I think he found himself in an interesting place, not where he expected to be.
Yeah, and that's something that came up, of course, many times during the arguments yesterday about whether, you think about the Loving case in the 60s at the Supreme Court about interracial marriage. And so those who want to strike down Prop 8 will point to those kinds of things and say, well, you have things outlying interracial marriage, and so, here, and of course then Prop 8 supporters will say that's fundamentally different. The purpose of marriage is the bedrock of our society, to procreate, to have children, it's a building block of our society. You can do that no matter what race you are, but you can't necessarily do that based on your sexual preference.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to today. Today's the discussion over the Defense of Marriage Act, which is critical to these two arguments here, because if Prop 8 is overturned and same-sex marriage is legal in California, if there is a Defense of Marriage Act still intact, and that is ruled constitutional today, that means that other states don't have to honor the marriages that are sanctioned in the state of California, right?
Exactly. And it's very tricky how these two are linked. Yesterday was a state issue. Today is the federal law passed by Congress, signed by then-President Bill Clinton, and essentially it says for purposes of a lot of federal issues, for the IRS, for tax benefits, for health benefits and different things at the federal level, that marriage will only be recognized between a man and a woman regardless of what individual states are doing. So there's a lot at stake here, but again, we have jurisdictional and standing issues because, as you may remember, the President and Attorney General Eric Holder announced they would no longer defend DOMA in court. Now, that left it without a defender, so a bipartisan group in the House took it up. They've been defending it with the services of Paul Clement, the former Solicitor General. But again, today the court has allotted 50 minutes for issues of jurisdiction and standing, and then an hour on the merits. And normally a case only gets 1 hour, so we expect it'll go over probably into 2 hours today. But again, there are issues about whether the case is even properly before the court.
Shannon, can you talk a little bit about the scene outside? Because I was up on the Hill yesterday, about 3 blocks away, and I was so struck. 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, people pouring over toward the Supreme Court, and just I'm making assumptions, but based on what I saw, it looked like I saw a lot of people who clearly were opposed to same-sex marriage were heading over there.
Yeah, it was interesting yesterday when I arrived there. Just getting to my position on the sidewalk where our cameras was set up it took quite a bit of time. There were thousands of people out there. It felt like there were more people there yesterday than there were during the health care arguments last year.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it was as far as the eye could see, and, of course, a lot of police sort of trying to keep the roads clear. I expect the same scene this morning. I'm not over there yet, but on my way, and we expect the same exact thing, and there was a march for marriage, so the conservative Prop 8 supporters were marching in as well. There were, I would say, thousands of advocates with their signs in favor of same-sex marriage out there as well, and everybody seemed to play nicely together.
I was going to say, being nice.
Everyone was nice. They behaved themselves.
They did.
All right, Shannon Bream, she is the Supreme Court reporter for Fox News. We will continue to watch your coverage of these very historic days over there at the Supreme Court, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Sure, have a great day.
You